Well, thank you for that very congenial introduction, Joe. And Jolene, it was great hearing what North Dakota's doing. About 5 years ago, us in Montana quit telling North Dakota jokes because they went zooming by us. But when I was in high school, those were the favorite joke of the day. Well, I'm happy to be here, Penny, for inviting me to the Montana Housing Partnership Conference, and I'm happy to be the last speaker because I always learn a lot more when I'm not talking. And I tell you what, the speakers that they've had so far, right from 10 a.m. on, have been terrific, and I've learned a lot, and I know you have also. But with that, they've covered so many topics and talked about so many things, it sort of shortened my speech considerably. But when I looked at my watch, I noticed my 30 minutes was now down to about 13 minutes. So you guys are lucky, because I am going to get you out of here in time for your break. So real quick, I just want to try and cover some things that I haven't heard covered yet this morning. And one is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And by that, that's one of those subjects that nobody wants to talk about. Well, I'm going to mention it. I didn't know I was going to live long enough to see 3 oil booms in eastern Montana in my lifetime. I was a grade schooler growing up in Glendive when the 1950s oil boom came. And my dad was out driving truck day and night in the oil field, and I had no idea what was going on out there. But I just know that across the river from Glendive, there were people putting up housing subdivisions, Highland Park, Forest Park, River Road, and I couldn't figure out why all those houses were being built. And they probably doubled the size of Glendive on that side of the river, which was unincorporated. Well, at the same time, they were building houses in Glendive also. And, one day my dad comes home and he says, well, I just got laid off by Halliburton. They're going someplace else to drill wells. And so he went to work as a custodian at the local high school for the next 30 years. So why have I been an advocate for low-income housing? Because, on a janitor's wages with 6 kids and a wife to feed, my family was definitely in the market for low-income housing. Well, and the other part of that story is when the oil companies left in the 50s, like I mentioned, they'd build a couple subdivisions on the other side of the river, but within the city limits, I walk out of my house at that time at 611 North Taylor, and to my right was the 500 block and the 400 block of Taylor and Rosser, and guess what? We had more polywog swimming pools than you have ever seen in your life. There was 4 blocks of basements poured and no houses going up on them. Now that scared people against building houses in an oil boom region. Well, time come and went, Glendive recovered, and I went away to college and came back and taught and coached at Billings Senior for 10 years. Well, in the meantime, I told my parents back in Glendive, and they says, yeah, Jerry, you can't believe what's going on down here. We got an oil boom going on. I says, what? And he says, yeah. So I went down and looked, and sure enough, they got drilling rigs down in Baker and up by Sidney and in Ekalaka and Fallon County and down around Broadus, and there's another oil boom going on. So I thought, this might be an opportunity. So I gave up my teaching career, moved to Glendive, bought 18 acres, subdivided it, got it incorporated into the city limits, and started building apartments and houses. And you know what? From 1977 until 1985, our occupancy rate was 100%, and we had a waiting list, probably 6 months out. But everybody said we were overcharging at that time. We were renting our 2-bedroom apartments for $250 a month. and some of the school teachers in Glendive that wanted to rent from us, it was a little iffy. So, you know, the single ones, of course, were sharing those 2-bedroom apartments. Well, about 1986 or 87, we had a vacancy in one of our apartments, and my dad said, Jerry, he was managing them for us. He said, Jerry, we got nobody left on the waiting list. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, we got 23 apartments full, but we got our first vacancy in 9 years. So I thought, well, it might be temporary. Well, 6 months later, we had 12 of those 24 apartments vacant. And once again, the banks in Glendive were getting people walking in, dropping keys on their desk saying, my address is, and the house is all yours. I can't sell it. And so once again, we had an oil bust. You know what was nice listening to Rick talk this morning? Listening to him, you would say that those concerns are gone. The 800-pound gorilla is gone. And I tend to agree with him. As mayor of Glendive now for the last 12 years, I have seen a lot of activity starting up in our region, and that map that Rick drew of the Bakken, if you looked real close and knew where Glendive was, you can see we're right on the edge of it. But he also mentioned that there's a lot of tanker trucks parking in Glendive overnight because there is not room in those other affected communities that are ground zero of this potential Bakken housing and oil boom. And I just want to keep moving because my 13 minutes is now down to 8. So if you're keeping track, you are keeping track, aren't you? Okay. But the other thing that you have to be concerned about to some degree, and we have developers in building those same units that Jolene was talking about. You can rent now new 2-bedroom apartments in Glendive for $1,700 a month. But luckily, we still have some affordable housing that people can rent for less than that. The old apartments that we built back in the 1970s, old, whoever thought 30 years or 40 years would make them old, but a developer out of Denver now owns those, and bless his heart, he doesn't need the money, so he has kept the rent on those down to $850 a month. So I applaud him for that. Still no school teachers in Glendive can afford them, but they are what we consider moderate income housing. The other good news is that Don Sturhan and Mountain Plains Equity came in about 4 or 5 years ago and built that senior not assisted living, but senior low-income housing complex, Makoshika Estates, which served a purpose in the community at that time. And we have to save those because those elderly people do not have any place to go. The second good news is that we have some developers looking at Glendive for putting in low to moderate income. And Alex Burkhalter out of Housing Solutions LLC out of Missoula, Montana, secured some tax credits in January. Wolf Point didn't get them all, but or Sydney. But anyway, we're pleased to announce that within a couple months he'll be starting construction of a 27-unit low-income housing complex in Glendive with 18 2-bedroom and 9 3-bedroom units. And because those units will be priced between $480 and $680, they will be affordable to a lot of the service workers that are looking for places to live. The other thing I want to mention in real quick fashion is that the other thing, and I don't know how it is in all the other communities, but not everybody in your community is welcoming growth with open arms. You know, we have people, especially across the river, who are thinking that trying to work together with the county to build infrastructure, a wastewater treatment facility that will take care of growth in the future, and upgrading our water plant is a conspiracy theory by the city to try and raise their sewer and water rates and allow growth. And not everybody wants that growth. So you have to be cognizant of that to some degree. What we are hoping is that with the state of Montana's help, the governor, the legislators, etc., some of that infrastructure grant money will be coming our way. Mainly because, I don't know how it is in your community, but the 3,300 people who are connected to or 3,300 homes, I should say, that are connected to our sewer and water facilities cannot bear by themselves the cost of building a new $16 or $17 million wastewater treatment facility and a $10 million upgrade to our water treatment plant that was given to us by the Burlington Northern, well, then it was the Northern Pacific Railroad in 1959. So the city has taken over that old facility, and we are trying to build new wastewater treatment in Glendive right now to accommodate growth and the DEQ requirements that are coming down the road. You know, those lagoons out there, they're not going to get the job done forever, and especially if you want to discharge into the Yellowstone River. So those 3,300 people need some help so they don't have to pay $100 or $150 a month for sewer and water. We're trying to keep the rates in Glendive below $100 a month for sewer and water after all is said and done. How much time I got now? I am down to 3.5 minutes, so I'll talk really fast. I just want to mention some bright spots, and I hope I did by telling you that Glendive is still a great place to live as far as some affordable housing, as far as clean air, good schools, all those things that people are looking for moving to a community. But housing is the key. And if you can't provide housing, you're not going to have workers there to do the jobs that are necessary. And this morning, Rick was absolutely right when he said people are getting creative and trying to get workers in, you know, flying them in from Minnesota for 2 weeks to work and flying them home. Well, I don't know about you, unless things have changed in Sydney. The last 3 times I've been there, McDonald's has been closed. You know, what good is it to have McDonald's in your town if it's never open? And that's because they can't find workers. And, you know, I did find a Subway shop, but if you don't get there by 3 in the afternoon, they're closed. So the gas stations in Sydney, I think, are the #1 source of fast food in Richland County. The thing we don't want to happen in any of our communities is for this need for infrastructure and the oil boom to become a political football. And, you know, God forbid that it should, but last year the legislature proposed a plan to give us $30 million in grants and relief, and the governor vetoed it because he said he couldn't afford it with the surplus that he needed. Well, thank God there is a God, because he had second thoughts. And now he's down here telling all of us in eastern Montana that there is some money available, but he wants to finance $45 million in tax incentive grants and programs through bonding it through the state, which is fine with me. I guess my point being is, you know, I really don't care where the relief comes from. I'm trying to please both sides. I'm telling the legislators, hey, we'll take $45 million from you in cash, and we'll take $45 million from the governor in bonding, and that'll give us $90 million, and then we will be closer to what we need. So make both sides happy. And in closing, I just want to say that you know, working together saves time and money. So anytime you can join on with some other program or some other government agency like the city and the county are doing in Dawson County and Glendive, it's going to benefit everybody. Thank you, everybody.